30 minutes earlier, Amara Osei stood outside the restaurant and lied to herself. She told herself the dress looked fine. It didn't. She'd borrowed it from her neighbor, a retired flight attendant whose hips were 2 sizes wider and safety pinned the back where the fabric bunched. She told herself the heels were comfortable. They weren't. She'd bought them at a secondhand shop in Itaewon for 11,001, and the left sole was already peeling. She told herself this was going to work, that this tutoring gig with some wealthy family would pay enough to cover the next wire transfer to Hannah's custody lawyer in Chicago and still leave her enough for rent and the phone bill she was 3 weeks behind on. She checked her reflection in the darkened glass of the shop window next door, smoothed a twist of hair, straightened her shoulders, practiced the smile she saved for people who needed to believe she had her life together. Good enough. The restaurant was called Gyeomgang. White tablecloths, low amber lighting, the kind of place where even the water glasses looked expensive. She'd looked it up the night before on her cracked phone screen and nearly canceled when she saw the menu. Appetizers that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. But the family had insisted on meeting here, said they always dined at Gumgang on Thursdays. She stepped through the front door and approached the host stand. A young woman in a pressed black uniform glanced up, startled, then recovered with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Amara Osei," she said. 7 o'clock. I'm meeting the Yoon family." The hostess checked the book, hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the dining room, then back to Amara. "One moment, please." She disappeared toward the back. Amara waited. 1 minute, two. The maitre d' stand felt very exposed suddenly, like standing on a stage she hadn't auditioned for. A couple walked past her toward their table without a second glance. A server carrying a bottle of wine slowed, looked at her, kept moving. The hostess returned with a waiter. Tall, mid-20s, vest buttoned tight, chin tilted at an angle that announced he'd already made up his mind. His name tag read Ji-hoon. He looked at her the way people look at something stuck to their shoe. "The Yoon reservation?" he said, making it sound like a question he already knew the answer to. He flipped through the book slowly, deliberately, though the hostess had just checked it. "I'm not seeing your name." "It's there. Amara Osei. The family invited me." Ji-hoon's smile was thin and cold. "This reservation is for a private client dinner. Perhaps there's been a miscommunication." He leaned on the word like it meant something else entirely. "The cafe next door serves a lovely bibimbap. Very casual, more your speed." The heat started at the base of her neck and climbed. She could feel it crawling up her throat, her cheeks, the tips of her ears. She kept her voice level. "I have the confirmation email right here." She pulled out her phone, showed him the screen. He barely glanced at it. "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you." He said it louder now, loud enough that the couple at the nearest table stopped talking, loud enough that the bartender looked over. "Our clientele has certain expectations, a certain standard. I don't think you'd be comfortable here." His eyes moved slowly down her dress, the safety pin seam she'd thought was hidden, the second-hand heels. "It would be better for everyone if you just—" "I have a reservation," she said. Her voice didn't waver. Her hands did, but they were at her sides where no one could see. "And I'm not leaving until I'm seated." Jihoon straightened his vest. The fake sympathy drained from his face. What replaced it was something raw and plain and old as dirt. "We don't serve your kind here. Please leave before I call security." The words landed like a slap across the dining room. 26 people heard them. Amara counted later because that's what her brain did when it couldn't process humiliation. It counted. 26 diners, 4 servers, 2 bartenders, 1 hostess. Not one of them said a word. Not one person stood up, pushed back a chair, opened their mouth. They just watched, forks suspended, wine glasses half raised, like she was a scene in a drama they could change the channel on. Amara's throat closed. Her eyes burned, but she would die before she let a single tear fall in this room. She reached for her bag on the empty chair beside her. A small hand caught her wrist. She startled, looked down. A little girl stood beside the table, dark-eyed and solemn, no older than 6. She wore a blue dress with a white collar, hair in neat pigtails tied with ribbons, and she was staring up at Amara with an intensity that didn't belong on a child's face. She hadn't been there a second ago. She'd appeared from nowhere, slipped away from whoever was watching her, drawn to this woman at this table by something no one else in the room could see. She didn't speak. She just held Amara's wrist and shook her head. Slowly, deliberately. Don't go. Amara blinked. The tears she'd been fighting retreated. She knelt instinctively, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. Hey there, sweetheart. The girl reached up and touched Amara's face. Not grabbing, not poking, tracing. Along her cheekbone, across the bridge of her nose, like she was memorizing something. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She held it out. Amara took it, unfolded it, a crayon drawing. Two figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. One tall, one small. The tall one had dark skin. Her chest ached. That's beautiful, she said softly. Is this you? The girl nodded, pointed to the other figure, then pointed at Amara. Me? Amara whispered. Vakab, but you just met me. The girl shrugged, a tiny solemn shrug that said she knew what she knew. She took Amara's hand and held it. Her fingers were warm and small and certain. Jihoon's voice cut in, irritated now. Little girl, step away from the... She's with me. The voice came from behind him, low, controlled, so quiet the entire dining room leaned forward to hear it. Jihoon turned. The man stood 3 feet away, tall, broad-shouldered, in a black suit that fit, like it had been built around his body. His face was carved from something harder than patience. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, expression so still it could have been a mask except for the faint pulse at his temple that said he was holding something back. 2 men flanked him in matching dark suits, hands clasped in front of them, faces blank and watchful. The restaurant's general manager materialized from the back office, face white. He bowed immediately, deeply. The kind of bow that comes from the spine, not the neck. The man in the suit didn't acknowledge him. His eyes were locked on Jihoon. Repeat what you just said. Jihoon's smirk collapsed. His mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the general manager, who looked like he might pass out. The dining room had gone so silent, Amara could hear the ice settling in someone's water glass. She didn't have a proper... I said repeat it. Jihoon swallowed. Sir, I was just... You're fired. 2 words, no heat, no volume, just certainty. Leave now. If you're still in this building in 60 seconds, my men will remove you. Jihoon's face went red, then white. You can't... I've worked here for... One of the suited men stepped forward. Just 1 step. Jihoon flinched like he'd been struck. He grabbed his coat from behind the host stand and walked out without another word. The glass door swung shut behind him. Silence. The man turned to Amara. His eyes moved over her face, the drawing in her hand, the little girl clinging to her fingers. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, recognition. Are you all right? Amara stood, lifted her chin despite the trembling in her legs. I'm fine, thank you. But I didn't need saving. His mouth twitched, not a smile, the ghost of one. My daughter disagrees. Amara looked down at the girl, still holding on, still staring up with those 2 old eyes. Your daughter? The girl pressed closer against Amara's leg, tucking herself there like she'd found something she'd been looking for and didn't intend to give it back. Her name is Suah, he said. Then after a pause that carried more weight than it should have, she doesn't do this. Do what? Touch people, hold hands, approach strangers. His voice was even, controlled, but something underneath it strained. She hasn't done any of those things in 3 years. Amara looked at the girl again. Suah gazed back, patient and certain, and tightened her grip. He insisted she stay for dinner. Amara almost refused. The humiliation still sat in her chest like a hot stone, and every diner who had watched her be degraded was still sitting in this room, still chewing, still pretending nothing had happened. But the girl wouldn't let go of her hand. And the way the man said please just once, like the word cost him something, made her sit back down. The tutoring family never showed. Amara checked her phone 3 times. The confirmation email stared back at her, unanswered. She'd learned later that the Yoon family had been a setup, an arrangement made by the Kang household staff who had been quietly searching for someone specific, an English-speaking woman with warmth and patience. someone Sua might respond to. But she didn't know any of that yet. What she knew was that the man barely ate. He watched his daughter instead, watching Amara, and something in his face looked like a man staring at a door he'd given up trying to open, watching it swing wide for someone else. Sua ate 3 bites of rice, then climbed into the chair beside Amara and fell asleep against her arm. Her breathing was soft and even. Her small fingers stayed curled around Amara's sleeve. After dinner, the black car waited at the curb, engine purring. The driver opened the rear door without a word. Sua was still asleep, transferred carefully from the chair to the man's arms to the back seat, where she immediately curled into Amara's side like a compass finding north. Her head rested against Amara's shoulder. Tiny breath puffed against her neck. The man settled across from them. The door closed with a soft, expensive click. "Where do you live?" he asked. She gave the address automatically. A cramped studio above a laundromat in a rough stretch of Itaewon. The kind of address you don't say out loud in a car like this. He nodded to the driver. The car pulled into traffic. Smooth, silent. Amara looked at the sleeping child, then at the man watching them both from the opposite seat. His face had returned to that unreadable mask. "I don't even know your name," she said, "on Kang Do-yun." Her blood went cold. Everyone in Seoul knew that name. Not from the news, because the news was careful with it. From whispers, from the way certain streets went quiet after dark. From the way men in expensive suits moved through Gangnam and Hanam-dong like the sidewalks belonged to them. Because they did. Kang Do-hyun, head of the Kang Syndicate, the man whose wife had been murdered 3 years ago in a hit that shook the entire country. The man no one crossed and everyone feared. Amara looked down at the child, sleeping against her shoulder, then back at the man. "She hasn't held anyone's hand like that in 3 years," he said quietly. "Since her mother." Amara's stomach tightened. She didn't feel rescued. She didn't feel grateful. She felt like she'd just stepped off the edge of something solid and into a current she couldn't see the bottom of. That night, Amara stared at the water stain on her ceiling and tried to convince herself it meant nothing. A random encounter, a rich man's politeness, a lonely child's impulse. She'd go back to her tutoring rounds tomorrow, find another client, forget the restaurant, forget the girl's hand in hers, forget the way Kang Do-yun looked at her like she was a lock he couldn't pick. Her phone sat silent on the mattress. No message from the Yoon family, no explanation, no reschedule. She rolled onto her side, wincing. The burn scars on her left shoulder pulled when she moved wrong, tight and shiny and permanent. Marcus had started with cigarettes. One at a time, always where clothes would cover them. Always followed by apologies so elaborate they sounded rehearsed. Because they were. Then the cigarettes weren't enough. Then it was the iron. Then it was his fists. Then it was a locked door and 3 years of believing she deserved it before she finally ran. 18 months in Seoul. New country, new number, fake name at work, cash only, where she could manage it. She'd scraped together enough for the cheapest flight out of O'Hare and landed in Incheon with $400 and a contact who knew someone who knew a restaurant owner who needed English-speaking staff. She'd built her invisible life from the ground up, very small, careful, quiet. It was working until tonight. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She almost dropped it. Then the message loaded, a photo, her apartment building, shot from across the street. The laundromat sign glowing in the foreground. Her window, 3rd floor, light on, no text. Then a second buzz. "Miss me, baby girl?" M. The room tilted. She sat up, hands shaking so hard the phone rattled against her palm. She typed and deleted 3 responses. Then she blocked the number, dropped the phone on the mattress, and pressed her palms flat against her eyes until the trembling stopped. He found her. After 18 months and 7,000 miles, Marcus Cole found her. She didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, knees to chest, eyes on the door, listening to every creak, every footstep in the hallway, every car that passed below the window. At 4 in the morning, she pulled the phone out again and stared at the blocked message like it might crawl off the screen. Dawn came gray and thin through the window. She dressed for her morning tutoring session, checked the hallway twice through the peephole, and stepped out. The man was standing across the street. She almost missed him. Baseball cap pulled low, dark jacket, leaning against the wall of the convenience store like he'd been there all night. But she knew that build. She knew the way he held his shoulders, angled forward, coiled. He didn't approach. He didn't wave, he just watched. Amara turned and walked the other direction. Fast. Not running, because running meant scared, and scared meant weak, and she'd promised herself she'd never be either again. She took the long route to the subway, doubled back through a department store, came out the other exit, switched lines twice. By the time she reached her tutoring job in Mapogu, her legs were shaking from adrenaline, not exertion. She taught 3 hours of English conversation to a banker's teenage daughters and smiled the entire time and didn't hear a single word she said. Her phone rang during the break. Do-hyun's number. She'd found his card in her jacket pocket, slipped there by someone during the car ride. She almost didn't answer. Sua drew something this morning. His voice was calm, direct, the way it had been the night before. She wants to show you. She hasn't drawn anything with color in months. Color. The word snagged on something in Amara's chest. The drawing from last night. Yellow sun, green grass. Two figures holding hands. I don't think that's a good idea, she said. Pause. Then, my people noticed a man surveilling your building last night. American, left at dawn. Should I be concerned? The air left her lungs. Silence stretched. She pressed her forehead against the cold window of the tutoring center and closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered. He didn't ask questions. He didn't press for details. He said, a car will be at your location in 20 minutes, and hung up. The car was there in 12. The Kang estate sat behind high walls in Hanam-dong, tucked into the hillside like it had grown there. Stone and glass and clean lines, nothing ornate, nothing wasted. Security cameras tracked the car through the gates. Two guards at the entrance nodded but didn't speak. The front door opened before Amara reached it. A woman in a crisp uniform bowed. Miss Osei, this way, please. The foyer was wide, cool marble floors. A staircase curving upward, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. Amara's second-hand heels clicked too loudly against the stone. She felt the disparity in her bones, the borrowed dress, the peeling sole. The woman she was pretending to be standing in the house of a man who could buy her building, her block, her entire district, and not notice the charge. Then Sua came running, arms wide, face bright, moving faster than Amara had ever seen a child move, weaving past the housekeeper, past the bodyguard, bare feet slapping marble. She crashed into Amara's legs with a force that nearly knocked her backward. Amara caught her. Sua clung, face pressed into her stomach, arms locked tight, entire body vibrating with something that looked like relief. She's been watching the door since this morning, the nanny said quietly from the hallway. Older woman, kind face, eyes rimmed with surprise. She doesn't run, not for anyone. Amara knelt. Sua pulled back just enough to shove a piece of paper into her hands. Another drawing. This one was bigger, more detailed. Amara and Sua in a garden surrounded by flowers, a bright yellow sun overhead, colors everywhere. Reds and blues and greens that Amara would learn later hadn't appeared in Sua's drawings since the night her mother was murdered. This is beautiful, baby, Amara whispered. Is this us? Sua nodded fiercely. Then she took Amara's hand and pulled her deeper into the house. Do-hyun was waiting in his study. Bookshelves floor to ceiling, a heavy desk, a window overlooking a walled garden. He stood when she entered, which surprised her. Men like him didn't stand for women like her. At least none ever had before. Sit, he said. Not an order? He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. She sat. Sua climbed into her lap immediately and stayed there, clutching the drawing like a shield. Do-hyun looked at them. His jaw worked. Then he spoke. She was 3 when it happened. Yuna, my wife, was killed in this house. Targeted hit, rival syndicate. Sua was in the next room. She heard everything. He paused. His voice didn't change in volume, but the control in it tightened. By the time I broke through the door, Yuna was gone. Sua was in her crib, silent. She hasn't spoken since. Amara's arms tightened around the girl. 7 therapists, Do-hyun continued. Specialists flown in from Tokyo, London, New York, experimental treatments, music therapy, art therapy. None of it worked. The diagnosis is trauma induced selective mutism. She can speak, the mechanism is intact. She chooses not to because the last thing she associates with her own voice is screaming for her mother. The room was very quiet. And then you knelt beside her in a restaurant, he said, and she touched your face. She hasn't touched a stranger's face since Yuna. Amara's throat burned. What do you want from me? Time. The word was simple, direct. No negotiation in it. Visit her, read to her, sit with her. Whatever you have, whatever it is about you, she responds to it. I'm not asking you to fix her. I'm asking you to be near her. And the man outside my apartment? My security team will handle him. Permanently. The word hung in the air. She searched his face. No bluff, no posture, cold certainty. Permanently, she repeated. He won't come near you again, ever. Amara looked down at Sua, who was tracing the crayon flowers in her drawing with one finger, peaceful and unbothered, like the world outside this room didn't exist. She looked back at Doyun. I'm not a charity case, she said. I'm not a kept woman. If I stay here, I work, I cook, I clean, I tutor, whatever needs doing, I pay my own way. I don't take handouts. For the first time, something shifted in his face. Not warmth, harder than that, respect. Deal. He extended his hand across the desk. She took it. His grip was warm, steady. His eyes held hers for one beat longer than necessary. Sua looked up between them, studying the handshake with the gravity of a 6-year-old who understood exactly what it meant. She placed her small hand on top of both of theirs and patted twice. Firm, decisive, done. That evening, Amara unpacked her single bag in the guest suite. The room was larger than her apartment. Soft lighting, clean lines, a bed that looked like it had never been slept in. She opened the closet and stopped. Clothes. Rows of them. Simple dresses, soft sweaters, jeans that she could tell just by looking would fit. No tags, no receipts. Just quiet, expensive thoughtfulness already waiting for her. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Mr. Kang mentioned you might prefer options beyond your uniform. She bowed and left. Amara stared at the closet. She ran her fingers across the fabric of a charcoal cardigan, softer than anything she'd ever owned. She hated how much she liked it. Her phone vibrated on the bed. She crossed to it. New number, unblocked. Whoever your new boyfriend is, he can't watch you forever. You know how this ends. You always come back. M. She blocked it, hands shaking. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her fist into her eyes until the shaking stopped. But when she lowered her hands and looked around the room, the expensive walls, the stocked closet, the soft light, she didn't feel safe exactly. But for the first time in 18 months, she didn't feel alone. 3 days. That's all it took for Amara to find a rhythm she didn't know she'd been missing. Morning started early. She braided Sua's hair in the sunlit kitchen while humming old songs her grandmother used to sing, Ghanaian lullabies that had no translation but carried warmth in every note. Sua sat perfectly still on the kitchen stool, feet swinging, eyes closed, leaning into Amara's hands like a plant tilting toward light. After hair came breakfast. Amara insisted on cooking, partly because she meant what she said about working and partly because it gave her hand something to do besides tremble. She made pancakes the first morning, and Sua ate 4. The nanny stared. She usually eats half of one, she whispered from the doorway. On a good day. Afternoons were for reading. Amara sat in the mansion's small library. Sua curled against her side and read picture books aloud. She did voices for every character, deep and growling for the villains, high and squeaky for the mice, swooping and dramatic for the princesses. Sua's laughter was silent but enormous, mouth open, shoulders shaking, eyes squeezed shut, her whole body convulsing with a joy that had no sound but filled the room anyway. Evenings were harder. Amara retreated to her suite after dinner, and the quiet pressed in. She tried not to notice how Do-hyun's gaze lingered whenever their paths crossed in the hallways, how he'd stop mid-conversation with his men when she walked past, how the hardness in his face softened by fractions she wasn't supposed to see. He was always working, phone pressed to his ear, laptop open, bodyguards trailing like shadows. But when Sua tugged his sleeve, he stopped. Immediately, without hesitation, every time. On the fifth night, Amara was reading to Sua before bed, a story about a bird who lost its song and spent the whole book looking for it. Amara closed the last page, kissed the girl's forehead, and said, "Good night, baby. Sweet dreams." She stood to leave. Sua's hand shot out and grabbed her sleeve. Amara turned. The girl's face was contorted with effort. Her mouth was working, lips pressing together and pulling apart, jaw tight, eyes filling with tears. She was trying, fighting something deep and locked inside her own throat, wrestling it toward the surface with everything she had. "Sua, it's okay. You don't have to stay." The word was barely there, a breath with edges, a whisper so small it could have been imagined, except it wasn't imagined because Amara heard it and her heart stopped, and her knees buckled and she dropped to the floor beside the bed. "What did you say, baby?" Sua's lips trembled, tears spilled, but her eyes were fierce, determined, the eyes of a girl who had decided something and would not be talked out of it. "Stay." Louder this time, clear, certain. Amara pulled her into her arms. Sua clung to her neck, face buried, body shaking, and Amara rocked her, slow and steady, humming through her own tears because she couldn't trust her voice not to break. She didn't see Doyun in the doorway, but he was there, had been there since she'd started reading, standing just out of sight, listening to her do the voices, listening to the silence his daughter lived in. He heard the word. His hand gripped the door frame. His eyes were glassy. His jaw worked, but nothing came out. He stood there for a long time, perfectly still, watching the woman on the floor hold his daughter, while something inside him came undone. Later, in the hallway, after Sua had finally fallen asleep with her fist coiled around the hem of Amara's shirt, Doyun was leaning against the wall outside the bedroom, arms crossed, face controlled except for the rawness around his eyes. 3 years, he said. 7 therapists, experimental treatments, specialists from Tokyo, London, New York. A fortune spent. Every expert told me it could take years more. Some said she might never speak again. His voice cracked on the word never. He caught it, steadied it, kept going. "And she chose to speak for you." Amara shook her head. "She didn't speak for me. She spoke because she finally felt safe enough to try." He looked at her. The mask was gone. What was underneath it was exhaustion and grief and something raw and desperate that had no name. "Stay," he said, then caught himself, looked away. "I mean, the arrangement. I hope you'll continue." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He nodded once, pushed off the wall, walked away. But at the end of the hallway, he stopped, didn't turn around. His voice was quiet. "Thank you." Then he disappeared around the corner. 2 days later, Amara was in the bathroom after a shower. Steam on the mirror. She wiped it with her hand, and there they were. The scars, running from her left shoulder to her upper arm. Some round and puckered from cigarettes. The largest one smooth and shiny and shaped like the flat of an iron. She'd learned to dress quickly, to cover them before anyone could see, to angle her body away from mirrors so she didn't have to see them herself. A knock at the door. Soft. She grabbed her shirt, but before she could pull it on, the door cracked open. Sua peeked through the gap. Amara froze. The girl's eyes moved to her shoulder, traveled across the marks. She didn't flinch. She didn't look scared. She walked into the bathroom, reached up, and touched the scars through the fabric of the shirt Amara was clutching against herself, gently. The way she touched Amara's face that first night. Then she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to Amara's shoulder, through the shirt, soft, deliberate. Amara's throat closed. She sank to her knees and the tears came. Not the furious ones she usually fought, but quiet, grateful ones she didn't try to stop. This child, who had lost the biggest thing a child could lose, who carried her own scars and the silence she'd lived inside for 3 years, understood pain without needing it explained. Sua patted her hair, patient, knowing, old in a way no 6-year-old should be. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around her. At 1 in the morning, she gave up and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Do-hyun was already there. He stood at the island in a black t-shirt and gray sweatpants. hair loose, falling across his forehead, no suit, no armor. The tablet on the counter glowed, but his eyes were on the window, staring at nothing. The kitchen was dark, except for the light above the stove. He didn't startle when she came in, just shifted his gaze to her. Can't sleep? She shook her head, moved to the kettle. Sua's been having bad dreams again. I sat with her until she settled. I know, I heard you humming. He paused. Or she sleeps better on the nights you're there. Amara poured water. The kettle clicked softly in the silence. She didn't look at him because looking at him in the dim light in a quiet kitchen at 1 in the morning felt like stepping too close to a ledge. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. You built all of this. She gestured vaguely. The house, the empire beyond it. After Yuna, you built it to protect Suo. Yes. Then who protects you? He was quiet for a long time. Then, no one. That's the job. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She turned toward him. He was watching her now, the mask stripped down to whatever lived underneath it. Tired, hollow in the places he'd filled with work and control in the cold machinery of power. The night Yuna was killed, he said. His voice was low, the words coming like something dragged from deep water. I was 2 rooms away, I heard her scream. I was right there and I heard her scream and I couldn't get through the door in time. They'd barred it from inside. By the time I broke through, she was gone and Sua was in her crib, staring at the ceiling, and she hasn't made a sound since. Until you. Amara's hand still on the mug. I built everything after that, he continued. The syndicate, the businesses, the walls. I made myself into something no one could touch. And it worked. No one has touched me in 3 years. He looked at his hands. But my daughter doesn't speak. And I come downstairs at 1 in the morning because the house is too quiet and I can still hear the scream. She set the mug down. Marcus started with words, she said quietly. Then shoves, then fists, then cigarettes, then the iron. She touched her shoulder. I told myself I deserved it for 3 years before I ran. Packed one bag, flew to Seoul, and built a life small enough to disappear in. You didn't deserve it. His voice was iron. I know that now. She met his eyes, but knowing and believing are different languages. He stepped around the island, close, not touching, but near enough she could feel the warmth radiating from him. He smelled like cedar and something clean and sharp underneath. Late night soap, no cologne at this hour. You carry everyone else's weight, he said. Sua, your niece, the job, the fear. Who carries yours? No one. That's why I'm strong. That's why you're exhausted. The air between them thickened. His hand rose, slow, giving her every chance to step back. He brushed a twist of hair from her face and his thumb lingered against her cheek, warm, rough at the edges. She leaned into it. A fraction. His eyes darkened. His phone buzzed on the counter, sharp, insistent. He pulled back, looked at the screen. The softness vanished from his face in an instant, replaced by something cold and focused. Security breach. East perimeter. Someone cut through the fence. They looked at each other. The name hung between them unspoken. He was already moving, already the syndicate boss again, voice clipped and lethal, calling commands into the phone. But at the kitchen door, he paused, turned back. Lock your door tonight. She nodded. He disappeared down the hall. Amara stood in the empty kitchen, mug growing cold in her hands, and pressed her fingers to the place on her cheek where his thumb had been. Her heart was hammering. But it wasn't Marcus she was afraid of anymore. Earlier that day, before the kitchen, before the perimeter breach, before any of it, Amara had sat in the guest suite and made a phone call that turned her stomach inside out. The custody caseworker in Chicago, a woman named Patricia who spoke in bureaucratic precision and never used a warm word when a cold one would do. Miss Osei, the hearing has been moved up. Judge Thornton wants updated documentation of your living situation, income, and stability within 30 days. If you can't demonstrate adequate conditions for a minor, the foster placement becomes permanent. 30 days. I have stable housing, Amara said, looking around the guest suite with its expensive walls and stock closet. I have income. I can provide everything Hana needs. We'll need documentation, address verification, employer letters, references. A pause. And Miss Osei, there's been a complaint filed. An anonymous caller claimed you're residing with a known criminal organization overseas. I'm required to investigate. Marcus. Amara's vision blurred. She gripped the phone so hard the case cracked. That complaint is fraudulent. The caller is my abusive ex-boyfriend attempting to sabotage these proceedings. I can provide. I understand your concern, but the complaint is on file. It will be addressed in the review. The call ended. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, phone in her lap, staring at the wall. 30 days. One anonymous call from a man 7,000 miles away, and everything she'd been fighting for teetered on a ledge. She thought about Hannah, 7 years old. Braids she did herself because the foster mother couldn't be bothered. A stuffed bear she'd had since birth, matted and missing one eye that she carried everywhere because it was the only thing she had left from her mother. Amara's sister, who died of an overdose on a Tuesday afternoon while Hannah was at school. Amara was all she had, and Amara was sitting in a Mafia boss's mansion in Seoul, hiding from one monster while living under the roof of another. The irony tasted like ash. She looked down at her hands, steady now. She'd cried enough. She'd been scared enough. Marcus could file his complaints and send his photos and stand across the street all he wanted. She wasn't running again. Not from him, not from this. She had 30 days. She had a little girl upstairs who'd spoken her first word in 3 years because of her. She had another little girl across an ocean who needed her to not fall apart. Amara stood up, straightened her shoulders, and went downstairs to make Sua's lunch.